Hana stood near the back wall of the big meeting room. Her hands were behind her back and her face showed nothing. She looked calm, but inside she was paying attention to everything. The room was full of aliens, not humans like her, but creatures from other planets. Some looked like walking crystals. Others had tentacles instead of arms. A few had multiple eyes or strange colors on their skin. They all sat around a curved table talking about the war. The enemy was called the Karath. They had been attacking different planets for years. The Galactic Coalition brought together many species to fight back. Humans were new members. They joined only 5 years ago. Most aliens still thought humans were primitive and not very smart. A blue light filled the center of the table. It showed maps and numbers floating in the air, pictures of enemy ships, attack patterns, battle reports. Hana knew all of this information. She had seen it before. She had written most of it. The Velcrin ambassador spoke first. He looked like a tall crystal that changed colors when light hit him. He pointed at the floating display with one of his limbs. "You can see their attack pattern here," he said. His voice sounded like music. "Every 47 days, they change from attacking to defending. It's very predictable." Hana's jaw tightened just a little. 43 days, not 47. She knew because she counted them herself. She lived with the enemy for almost a year. But nobody asked her opinion. Next, a general from Talmor spoke. He had 4 eyes and green skin. "The Karath have special weapons," he said. "They can make things disappear and reappear. We've never seen this technology before. It will take us at least 2 cycles to figure out how to stop it." Hana wanted to laugh, but she didn't. She had already written 3 reports about those weapons. She explained exactly how they worked. She even told them how to block the weapons. Those reports were sitting somewhere in a computer. Nobody read them. Admiral Thrace was the only other human in the room. He was Hana's boss. He cleared his throat to get everyone's attention. "Lieutenant Commander Kim just came back from a long mission," he said. "She was in Karath space for almost a year. Maybe she can help us understand them better." All the aliens turned to look at Hana. Some looked curious. Others looked annoyed. They didn't think a human could teach them anything. The Velcrin ambassador spoke again. This time his tone was not friendly. "Ah yes, the human observer. Tell me, did you take good notes? I heard your species still uses very simple methods to record information." It was an insult. He was saying humans were backward and stupid, that they couldn't do important work. The other aliens had thought this for years. Humans were the newest and weakest members of the coalition. Their technology was old. Their ships were slow. Their methods were considered primitive. Hana stepped forward. Her face was still calm. "No notes, Ambassador." The crystal alien seemed pleased. "Then how can you contribute to this meeting? Without records, you have nothing to share." A small smile appeared on Hana's face. "I didn't take notes because you're all reading my reports out loud." The room went completely quiet. Every alien stopped moving. They stared at her. "What did you say?" The Velcrin ambassador's voice was sharp. Hana walked closer to the table. "Your 47-day cycle? It's actually 43.2 days. I wrote that in report K77. I sent it 4 months ago." She pointed at the floating display. "Those special weapons? They're not new. They're modified mining tools from the Relmac species. The Karath stole the design and changed it for war. I explained all of this in report K91. I also wrote 3 different ways to block those weapons." She moved her hand across the display, changing the images. "And those fleet movements you called unpredictable? They follow a simple pattern. The Karath don't have many resources. They need to protect their supply ships. I wrote about this in report K83. The 4-eyed general leaned forward. "That's impossible. We've been studying the Karath for years." "From space," Hana said quietly. "You watched them from your ships. I lived with them. I walked in their cities. I worked on their ships. I ate their food and spoke their language. I was on the ground, not floating in orbit." She pulled out a small device from her pocket. It showed a list of files. "I spent 6 months working with a Karath salvage crew. They thought I was one of them. Then I worked for 3 months in their logistics department, moving supplies. After that, I spent 2 months in their prison. On purpose. I needed to understand how they treat prisoners." Admiral Thrace sat back in his chair. He knew all of this already. He had read every report Hana sent. The problem was getting other species to read them too, getting them to take human intelligence seriously. You're saying you did undercover work in enemy territory? The Velcrin ambassador sounded different now. Not insulting. More like surprised and maybe a little scared. That takes years of preparation. Decades even. It took 3 months to prepare, Hana said. Then 11 months, 3 weeks, and 2 days inside Karath space. And yes, I did undercover work. Deep undercover. I lived as one of them. A counselor with tentacles spoke up. Her voice shook a little. But the physical differences. Karath don't look like humans. They don't breathe the same air. How did you survive? We adapted, Hana said simply. That's what humans do. We made special equipment. A filter system under my skin that changed the air I breathed. Contact lenses that let me see like they do. Artificial skin that looked and felt like theirs. Special chemicals that made me smell like a Karath. The four-eyed general shook his head. The cultural knowledge alone would take years to learn. Their language, their customs, their social rules. 3 months, Hana repeated. 1 month learning their language. 1 month getting used to the equipment. 1 month practicing with Karath refugees who joined the coalition. Then I was ready. She showed them pictures on the display. Images of Karath cities taken from street level. Photos from inside their ships. Documents with their writing. Battle plans. Supply routes. Everything was detailed and clear. I pretended to be a refugee from a planet they conquered, Hana explained. I got a job on a merchant ship fixing things. I was good at it because humans know how to repair old equipment. We've been doing it for centuries on Earth. Within 2 weeks, the crew trusted me. Within a month, I was in their meetings. I heard their plans. I saw their maps. I learned their secrets. The Velcrin ambassador's crystalline body had stopped glowing bright. He looked dimmer now, which meant he was thinking hard. And the prison time? You said you were captured on purpose? Hana nodded. I needed to know how they treat prisoners. What questions they ask. What their security looks like from the inside. So I sabotaged a power system in an obvious way. They caught me just like I planned. I spent 2 months in their detention center. Then I escaped with complete information about their prison protocols, their interrogation methods, and their facility layouts. She paused, looking around the room at all the shocked alien faces. That information is in Report K-12-3, along with everything else I learned. All of it sent through proper channels, all of it waiting to be read. The room stayed silent for a long moment, then everyone started talking at once. Aliens turned to their assistants, pulling up files on computers. Others argued with each other. The whole meeting dissolved into chaos, but Hana just stood there, calm and still. She had done the work. She had risked her life. She had given them everything they needed to understand the enemy. Now finally they were starting to listen, not because she demanded it, but because the truth was impossible to ignore. The human they had dismissed as primitive had done what none of them could do. She had walked among the enemy and come back with answers. The meeting room exploded with noise. Aliens shouted at each other. Some were angry. Others were confused. Everyone had an opinion and they all wanted to share it at the same time. Deep cover operations take decades to plan. One alien yelled. The physical differences make infiltration impossible. Another one argued. Humans don't have the biological adaptations to survive in Karath conditions. A third voice added. Admiral Thrace raised his hand slowly. The room got quieter bit by bit. When everyone was finally silent, he spoke. I think Lieutenant Commander Kim can answer your questions. He looked at Hana and nodded. Hana walked to the holographic display. With a wave of her hand, she changed what was showing. The Coalition's old intelligence reports disappeared. In their place, her own files appeared. The difference was huge. The Coalition had pictures from space. They had intercepted radio messages. That was it. But Hana's reports showed photos from inside Karath buildings, maps of their facilities drawn from memory, recordings of conversations with Karath soldiers, even samples of their blood and tissue for scientific study. You're right about the physical problems, Hana began. The Karath breathe an atmosphere full of methane gas. They live in lower gravity than Earth. They see colors we can't see, and they have an incredible sense of smell. Most species would be discovered immediately if they tried to infiltrate. She pulled up an image. It showed what looked like a Karath female. But it was actually Hana in disguise. The aliens in the room leaned closer to look. This is where human adaptability helps, Hana said. We're very good at changing to fit new environments. It's how we survived on Earth. The Velcrin ambassador's crystal body rotated slightly. That disguise is remarkable, but the atmosphere problem alone should have killed you. We solved it, Hana said. She showed technical drawings on the display. We put a special filtration system under my skin. It processes the gases in real time. The technology isn't new for us. We use similar systems for deep-sea diving and mountain climbing on Earth. We just modified it to handle methane instead of water or thin air. She zoomed in on one part of the diagram. The system runs on biological fuel cells. They convert methane into usable energy. This meant I could operate for months without needing to recharge or refuel. I was completely self-sufficient. A counselor with tentacles waved them nervously. What about seeing in their visual spectrum? Karath eyes work completely differently than most species. Contact lenses, Hana answered. They convert the light spectrum in real time. Human miners use the same technology when working in dark asteroid fields. We just adjusted the frequency range. She changed the image again. And the smell issue was harder but not impossible. We created pheromone synthesizers based on Karath biological samples. We captured some of their soldiers early in the war and took tissue samples. Our scientists spent months analyzing their chemical signatures. Then we built devices that could replicate them perfectly. The four-eyed general's membranes flickered rapidly, but the preparation time, learning their culture, mastering their language, understanding their society, that should take years at minimum. 3 months, Hana repeated firmly. Total time from when they gave me the mission to when I deployed into Karath space. That's impossible. The Velcrin ambassador's voice was loud and sharp. Our operatives need at least 15 cycles for similar missions. Admiral Thrace stood up. He couldn't hide his pride anymore. Ambassador, let me explain something about humans. We evolved on one planet with extreme environmental differences. Humans live in frozen Arctic regions where the temperature kills most life. We also live in scorching deserts with no water. We thrive in dense jungles full of diseases. We survive on tiny islands in the middle of vast oceans. We adapt to mountains so high there's barely any air to breathe. He gestured widely. Our planet has thousands of different languages, hundreds of different cultures. Children grow up learning to adapt to new places, new customs, new languages. It's normal for us. A human might be born in one country, grow up in another, and work in a third. We do this all the time. Thrace pointed at Hana. Lieutenant Commander Kim speaks 7 Earth languages fluently. She can communicate in 12 more at a basic level. She grew up in 3 different countries on Earth. She attended military schools on 2 different continents. She completed survival training in Arctic wastelands, tropical rainforests, and desert badlands. Learning 1 more language and 1 more culture? He smiled. That's just a normal Tuesday for a human intelligence officer. Hana brought up a timeline on the display. It showed her entire preparation period broken down day by day. Month 1, Karath linguistics and cultural protocols. I studied their grammar, their idioms, their social customs. I learned how they greet each other, how they show respect, how they express anger or joy. She moved to the next section. Month 2, physical adaptation. Getting used to the prosthetics that changed my appearance. Training my body to work with the atmospheric processor. Adjusting to the sensory modifications. Learning to move like they move, to gesture like they gesture. The timeline advanced again. Month 3, live training with Karath refugees who defected to Coalition space. They taught me the small things. How to eat without looking awkward. What jokes are funny and which ones are offensive. Regional accents and dialects. Body language that changes meaning based on context. She zoomed in on her deployment phase. Then I infiltrated a Karath merchant vessel. I posed as a refugee from a world they conquered. I told them I had salvage skills, which was true. I spent 3 years working in Earth's orbital debris fields before joining military intelligence. Those skills made me valuable to them. Her finger traced the timeline forward. Within 2 weeks, they trusted me enough to give me access to their navigation systems. Within a month, I was sitting in on their strategy briefings. Within 2 months, I knew more about their operations than most of their own officers. The room had gone completely silent again. But this time it was different. Before they were skeptical. Now they were beginning to understand something important about humanity, something they had missed in all their earlier assessments. The tentacled counselor spoke very quietly. Her tentacles were completely still now. You mentioned spending 2 months as a prisoner. Voluntarily, why would you do that? Hana's expression became more serious. Because I needed complete intelligence on their detention systems. how they treat captives, what information they try to extract, what psychological techniques they use during interrogation, what weaknesses exist in their security. She pulled up another report. So I sabotaged a power relay in an obvious way. Something they would definitely catch but not serious enough to execute me for. They arrested me exactly as planned. I spent 2 months in their detention center, experiencing everything a prisoner would experience. You deliberately got yourself captured by a hostile enemy, the Velcrin ambassador said slowly. His tone was no longer insulting or skeptical. It was something closer to awe and maybe fear. Yes, Hana confirmed. And after 2 months, I escaped. I brought back complete intelligence on their detention protocols, their interrogation techniques, their guard rotations, and their facility layouts. All of that is in Report K-12-3. She looked around the room at the shocked faces. That report also includes recommendations for rescuing coalition prisoners. Exact entry points, security system vulnerabilities, best times to attempt extraction, everything you would need. A small alien with blue skin spoke up for the first time. All of these reports you mention, where are they now? In your database, Admiral Thrace said. His voice was calm but had an edge to it. Every single report was filed through proper channels. We marked them with appropriate classification levels. We followed all protocols. We submitted them to Coalition Intelligence Command and waited for acknowledgement. He paused for effect. We never received a single reply. Not one acknowledgement that anyone had even opened the files. The silence that followed was heavy and uncomfortable. The aliens looked at each other. Some seemed embarrassed. Others looked angry, but not at Hana. They were angry at their own people for ignoring valuable intelligence. The tentacled counselor's voice trembled. They were ignored because they came from humans? Not ignored exactly, Hana said. Her voice was cold now. Filed away. Dismissed because we're new members of the Coalition. Because we've only been in space for a short time. Because everyone assumed that a young species couldn't possibly know more than civilizations that have been exploring the galaxy for thousands of years. She let that sink in before continuing. And that assumption has had consequences. Real consequences. People have died who didn't need to die. Battles have been lost that could have been won, all because nobody bothered to read the reports that a human risked her life to gather. The Velcrin ambassador's crystalline body had stopped glowing in its usual pattern. This was a sign of deep thought in his species. He looked at Hana carefully. Lieutenant Commander Kim, he said slowly, you mentioned multiple reports. How many intelligence summaries did you actually file during your mission? Hana glanced at Admiral Thrace. He gave her a tiny nod. She pulled up a file directory on the holographic display. The list appeared and started scrolling. It kept scrolling, and scrolling, and scrolling. 47 major reports, Hana said, each one between 30 and 200 pages long depending on the topic, plus 139 minor field reports, and thousands of real-time intelligence updates that I sent whenever I had secure communication access. The four-eyed general's membrane went completely still. And where are all these reports now? Admiral Thrace stood up and moved to stand beside Hana. Every single report was filed with Coalition Intelligence Command. We followed standard protocol. We submitted them through proper channels. We marked them with the right classification levels, and we waited for feedback. His tone was carefully neutral, but there was anger underneath. We never received acknowledgement of receipt. Not for a single report, nobody spoke. The silence was so complete that you could hear the hum of the holographic projector. The tentacled counselor's limbs coiled tightly. This was a gesture of shame in her species. They were ignored? Not ignored, Hana said. Her voice was steady but cold. Filed away. Put aside. Dismissed. Because they came from a human source. Because we've been Coalition members for only 5 years, and apparently that's not long enough to be taken seriously. She pulled up a specific report on the display. This is Report K39. It contains the exact location of the Karath primary shipyards, complete with facility layouts, production schedules, and defensive positions. I submitted it 7 months ago. Hana paused, letting them look at the detailed information. According to my intelligence sources, the Coalition planned a major offensive against suspected shipyard locations last week. You attacked the wrong coordinates. The Velcrin ambassador's form flickered. The Meridian offensive. We lost 37 ships in that battle. You would have lost 0 ships, Hana said quietly, if you had attacked the actual shipyard, the real one that I documented in this report. With complete facility layouts, with defensive positions mapped, with optimal attack vectors calculated, everything you needed for a successful strike. She switched to another report. This is Report K-22. It predicted the Karath raid on the Telshara colonies. I gave the exact week it would happen. I submitted this report 5 months before the attack occurred. The four-eyed general's voice was barely a whisper. 8,000 civilians died in that raid. I know, Hana said. Her jaw clenched tight. I was there. I watched it happen from inside a Karath assault ship because I was still embedded with their forces. I filed my report. I marked it urgent. I waited for coalition forces to evacuate the colonies before the attack. She looked around the room at each alien representative. No evacuation order ever came. Those 8,000 people died because nobody read my report. Nobody believed that a human could accurately predict enemy movements. Admiral Thrace pulled up a comprehensive file that showed all of Earth's intelligence submissions. Since Lieutenant Commander Kim's deployment, Earth's Intelligence Division has submitted over 400 reports to Coalition Command. Detailed, actionable intelligence on Karath military capabilities, economic vulnerabilities, cultural practices, strategic objectives. He gestured at the massive data collection. We've provided technical specifications for their weapon systems, biological samples for developing medical countermeasures, predictive analyses that have been accurate within 93% confidence intervals. Everything you could possibly need to understand and counter the Karath threat. Thrace let that information sink in before continuing. And yet here we are, watching you present intelligence that is months out of date, intelligence that is incomplete, intelligence that is in some cases actively wrong, all while the correct information sits unread in coalition databases stamped with Human Intelligence Division, like it's some kind of warning label. The tentacled counselor's voice trembled. Admiral Thrace, we had no idea. The intelligence summaries we received never mentioned human contributions. You thought humans couldn't possibly know more than civilizations that have been spacefaring for millennia, Hana interrupted. Her composure finally cracked a little. Her voice got louder. Someone decided that human intelligence wasn't worth reviewing. Someone made the assumption that we're too young, too primitive, too inexperienced to provide valuable information. She gestured sharply at the holographic display showing all her reports, and that assumption has cost lives. Coalition lives. Lives that I might have saved if anyone had bothered to read what I risked everything to gather. Hana pulled up one final image. It was a photograph taken from inside a Karath military command center. The detail was extraordinary. You could see tactical displays showing fleet positions, officer workstations with security codes visible, biometric locks on critical systems, guard positions, everything. This is their primary military command center on Karath Prime, Hana said. Their home planet. I took this photograph 11 months ago while I was working there as a data analyst. They thought I was processing shipping manifests. Actually, I was documenting their entire command structure. She zoomed in on different parts of the image. I know the security codes. I know the shift rotations. I know which officers are sympathetic to peace negotiations and which ones are hardline expansionists who will never stop fighting. I know what they eat for breakfast. I know what keeps them awake at night. I know what arguments might convince them to seek diplomatic solutions instead of military ones. She turned to face the assembled representatives directly. All of that information is in my reports. Detailed psychological profiles, cultural analysis, diplomatic recommendations, information that could potentially end this war without more bloodshed. And it has been sitting in coalition databases for months, gathering digital dust because apparently humans aren't worth listening to. The Velcrin ambassador's crystalline form had dimmed considerably. He looked much darker now. Lieutenant Commander Kim, on behalf of Coalition Intelligence Command, I must apologize. This is an unconscionable failure of our systems and our judgment. The words seemed to cause him physical pain to say. Velcrin rarely apologized to anyone, especially not to species they considered inferior. With respect, Ambassador, Hana said, her voice steady again. Apologies don't bring back the dead. They don't return those 37 ships to their crews. They don't resurrect 8,000 civilians on Telshara. What I want to know is simple. Are you going to read the reports now? The Velcrin ambassador straightened up. Yes, immediately. I am calling in my entire intelligence staff. We will review every report your division has submitted. Every single one. The four-eyed general spoke up. I am doing the same. My military intelligence team will begin comprehensive analysis within the hour. The tentacled counselor added, the council will be informed of this failure. We will implement new protocols to ensure that intelligence from all member species receives proper review. This cannot happen again. Other representatives around the table echoed similar commitments. The mood in the room had completely transformed. These aliens had come to the meeting expecting to educate a primitive human about basic intelligence gathering. Instead, they discovered they had been ignoring the most valuable intelligence source in the entire coalition. Hana pulled up her full report archive and began sharing access codes. I'm granting full access to all files now. You'll find them organized by topic: military intelligence, cultural analysis, economic data, political profiles, technological assessments. Everything is cross-referenced and indexed for easy searching. As the aliens began downloading files and calling in their staff members, Admiral Thrace leaned close to Hana and spoke quietly. Well done, Lieutenant Commander. I think they're finally listening. Hana nodded but didn't smile. They're listening now because they have no choice. The evidence is too overwhelming to ignore, but we shouldn't have needed overwhelming evidence. They should have read the reports when we first submitted them. True, Thrace agreed. But at least now things will change. Other human intelligence officers won't face the same dismissal you did. Their work will be taken seriously from the start. Maybe, Hana said, or maybe we'll have to prove ourselves again and again. Some prejudices die hard. She watched the aliens frantically reviewing her reports, their expressions shifting from skepticism to shock to understanding. They were beginning to see the Karath not as mysterious monsters but as people, desperate people. Dangerous people, but still people who could potentially be reasoned with. And that shift in perspective, Hana knew, was the first step toward ending the war. Not through total victory or crushing defeat, but through understanding and negotiation, the human way. 3 hours passed. The briefing room was still full of aliens, but everything felt different now. The holographic display showed Hana's intelligence reports in all their complete detail. The alien representatives were starting to understand just how much valuable information they had ignored. The Velcrin ambassador had called in his entire intelligence staff. They crowded around secondary displays, checking Hana's reports against their own data. Every few minutes, someone would make a sound of surprise or dismay. They kept discovering how much better the human intelligence was. One of the Velcrin analysts waved his limbs excitedly at a report on his screen. This cultural analysis of Karath military hierarchy explains everything. The command structure inconsistencies we've been tracking for years aren't inconsistencies at all. They're cultural protocols we didn't understand. Hana walked over to look at what he was reading. The Karath have a complex honor system that is more important than formal rank in many situations. It's based on personal combat achievements and family lineage. A lower-ranked officer can give orders to a higher-ranked one if their honor status is superior. She pulled up a diagram showing the honor hierarchy. That's why your predictions about their command decisions kept failing. You were analyzing the formal organizational chart without understanding the informal power structure that actually controls decision-making. The four-eyed general was reviewing tactical data with his military staff. His eyes were blinking very rapidly. Lieutenant Commander, this analysis of their fleet deployment patterns. You're suggesting their aggression is actually defensive in nature? I'm not suggesting it, Hana said firmly. I'm confirming it based on direct observation and extensive conversations with Karath officers and civilians. She pulled up economic data on the main display. The Karath home system is resource poor. Their planets don't have enough rare earth elements, water, or organic compounds to support their population long-term. Their expansion isn't about ideology or conquest for its own sake. It's about survival. They need resources that their homeworlds lack. She overlaid mining survey data on a star map. Look at the pattern carefully. They're not conquering planets randomly. They're following geological surveys. They target worlds with specific mineral compositions that they desperately need. Every single world they've taken has valuable resources they can extract. The general stared at the map. The pattern was obvious once you knew what to look for. They're desperate. Yes, Hana agreed. They're desperate, not evil. There's an important difference. Desperate people can be negotiated with. Evil people cannot. The tentacled counselor gestured to one of Hana's reports on her tablet. You interviewed Karath civilians extensively. Hundreds of conversations. How did you gain their trust enough to have such honest discussions? By being honest, Hana said simply. Not about being human, obviously. That would have gotten me killed immediately. But about being someone genuinely trying to understand them. I worked alongside them in salvage operations. I ate meals with them. I shared their hardships when resources were scarce. I learned their songs. I listened to their stories. I paid attention to their fears and hopes. She pulled up audio files on the display. These are recorded conversations with Karath workers, soldiers, parents, and children. They talk about their lives, their struggles, their dreams for the future. They're not monsters. They're people trying to survive in a universe that hasn't been kind to them. Admiral Thrace watched the alien representatives processing all this new information. He felt quiet satisfaction. He had known from the beginning that Hana's intelligence was extraordinary. The challenge had always been getting others to see it, to take it seriously. Now they finally were. There's something else, Hana said. The room immediately went quiet. Everyone turned to look at her. While I was embedded with the Karath military, I made contact with a faction of their leadership that wants to end the war. The Velcrin ambassador's crystalline body rotated sharply. You established direct contact with Karath leadership? High-level military and political leaders? With 3 separate members of their high command, actually, Hana said. They represent a minority faction, but they have significant support among both military officers and civilian politicians. They're tired of fighting. The Karath people are exhausted. She pulled up profiles of 3 Karath officers on the display. Their faces appeared, along with detailed biographical information. Commander Tharek oversees their northern fleet. Fleet Admiral Vesh controls supply and logistics for the entire military. High Counselor Mera is their most influential civilian leader. Between the 3 of them, they control approximately 30% of Karath military forces. They also have significant political influence in the Karath government. The 4-eyed general leaned forward intensely. What do they want? What are their terms? Resources, Hana answered. Access to mining rights on uninhabited worlds that the Coalition isn't using. Technology sharing for more efficient resource extraction, so they need less territory. And security guarantees. They want assurance that the Coalition won't attempt to conquer Karath space once they're weakened by peace agreements. She paused to let them absorb that. In exchange, they're willing to withdraw from all occupied territories on a phased timeline. They'll submit to weapons inspections. They'll establish joint military protocols to prevent future conflicts. They'll participate in cultural exchange programs, everything necessary to build lasting peace. The room erupted with noise again, but this time it was excitement, not skepticism. The tentacled counselor was already typing urgent messages to the Coalition Council. The Velcrin ambassador was talking rapidly with his intelligence chief. Even the normally calm 4-eyed general showed visible signs of animation. This could end the war, the Velcrin ambassador said slowly. He was thinking carefully about every word. If what you're saying is accurate and verifiable, it's accurate, Hana said firmly. I spent 6 months building relationships with these officers. I worked directly under Commander Tharek for 4 months. I had regular meetings with Fleet Admiral Vesh when coordinating supply movements. High Counselor Mira and I had many long conversations about Karath history and culture. She pulled up communication logs. I've verified their positions within the Karath power structure. I've mapped their support networks. I've assessed their sincerity through multiple independent methods. They genuinely want peace. They're willing to meet in neutral territory under Coalition observation, but they need assurance that the Coalition is willing to actually negotiate, not just demand unconditional surrender. Admiral Thrace spoke up. His voice was steady but carried an edge of frustration. And all of this information has been in Lieutenant Commander Kim's reports for 4 months. Report K-33 titled, Preliminary Contact with Karath Peace Faction. Report K-37 titled, Detailed Analysis of Karath Internal Political Divisions. Report K-42 titled, Proposed Framework for Karath Coalition Peace Negotiations. All submitted through proper channels. All completely ignored. The weight of that statement settled over the room like a heavy blanket. 4 months. They could have been negotiating peace for 4 months already. Ships wouldn't have been destroyed. Soldiers wouldn't have died. Civilians wouldn't have been killed, all while a complete roadmap to peace sat unread in coalition databases because it came from a human. The Velcrin ambassador's voice was very quiet. Lieutenant Commander Kim, if I may ask a personal question. Why did you do this? You risked your life repeatedly. You endured captivity and interrogation. You spent almost a year away from your own people, living among enemies who would have killed you if they discovered the truth. All to gather intelligence that you had no guarantee anyone would even read. Why? Hana was silent for a long moment. Then she smiled slightly. Because it's what humans do, Ambassador. We're new to the galactic community. We're the youngest species here by far. We have the most primitive technology. We have the least impressive credentials. But we understand something that I think some of the older species have forgotten over their long histories. She gestured to the holographic display showing the Karath peace faction profiles. Every war ends eventually. The question is how it ends. Wars that end with mutual understanding cost fewer lives than wars that end with complete destruction of one side. Peace built on comprehension lasts longer than peace built on domination. She pulled up an image of Earth floating in space. The blue and green planet looked small and fragile. My world has fought countless wars throughout our history. We've nearly destroyed ourselves multiple times. We know intimately what it costs to keep fighting when peace is possible. We've learned through bitter experience that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is try to understand your enemy instead of just defeating them. The tentacled counselor's limbs moved in a gesture of respect. Your species has wisdom that comes from suffering. We forget sometimes that difficulty can be a teacher. Yes, Hana agreed. And now we're offering to share what we've learned. Not because we want recognition or praise, but because we don't want others to suffer as we did. We don't want the Karath to be destroyed. We don't want more coalition soldiers to die. 3 months passed after that meeting. Hana stood on the observation deck of the coalition flagship, watching something incredible happen below. Through the massive windows, she could see Telmora Prime Station floating in space. Inside that station, representatives from the Galactic Coalition and the Karath Collective were signing a peace agreement. It had taken 12 weeks of hard negotiation. There were many difficult conversations. Both sides had to compromise on things they didn't want to give up. But the framework Hana proposed in Report K-42 had worked. The plan held together through all the arguments and disagreements. The Karath would withdraw from all occupied territories over the next 2 years. It would happen in phases, with coalition observers monitoring every step. In exchange, the coalition would grant the Karath mining rights to 7 resource-rich systems. These were uninhabited systems that no one was using. The coalition would also provide technological assistance to help the Karath extract resources more efficiently. Joint military committees would oversee the entire transition period. Cultural exchange programs would begin within the year. Karath students would attend coalition universities. Coalition diplomats would live on Karath worlds. Most importantly, both sides would establish permanent diplomatic missions. Future conflicts would be resolved through talking, not fighting. Quite a view, Admiral Thrace said. He walked up to stand beside Hana at the window. Though I suspect you've seen this ceremony from more interesting angles during your time with them. Hana smiled. The Karath delegation insisted on wearing traditional ceremonial armor. Commander Theric is wearing the same style I saw him in 11 months ago when I worked on his ship. It feels strange seeing him here in this context. Last time I saw him, I was pretending to be a terrible maintenance technician. Does he know it was you? That the incompetent technician was actually a human spy? I told him 3 days ago during the preliminary meetings, Hana said. I thought it was only fair that he knew the truth. He laughed for about 10 minutes straight. Apparently, I was the worst maintenance technician he'd ever seen, but I was so earnest and hardworking that he didn't have the heart to fire me. He just kept assigning me simpler and simpler tasks. Admiral Thrace shook his head in amazement. So your cover story for infiltrating an enemy warship was being incompetent at your job? Sometimes the best disguise is appearing harmless and a little stupid, Hana explained. It makes you forgettable, non-threatening. People don't suspect someone they have to constantly help and supervise. Also, I genuinely was terrible at Karath maintenance procedures. Their engineering systems are completely different from human standards. I was mostly guessing and hoping I didn't break anything important. Below them, the signing ceremony reached its conclusion. The delegates stood up from the long table. Then something remarkable happened. The Karath commander and the Velcrin ambassador reached toward each other. They clasped appendages in a formal gesture of respect. This would have been unthinkable just 3 months ago. These species had been killing each other. Now they were shaking hands like old friends. "The Velcrin ambassador requested a meeting with you," Admiral Thrace said. "Coalition Intelligence Command wants to implement new protocols for reviewing intelligence reports from all member species. They specifically asked if you would be willing to consult on developing these new processes." "They want me to teach them how to read their own intelligence reports properly?" Hannah asked with some amusement. "They want you to teach them not to dismiss information based on where it comes from," Thrace corrected. "There's an important difference. The Council has also opened all of your reports for review by all member governments. Early analysis suggests that your intelligence methods have applications far beyond just the Karath situation. Your cultural analysis techniques, your infiltration approaches, your philosophy of human intelligence gathering, it's changing how the entire coalition thinks about espionage and diplomacy." Hannah turned away from the window to face her commanding officer. "Admiral, I only did what any human intelligence officer would do. We're trained to immerse ourselves in other cultures, to understand rather than just observe from a distance. It's not revolutionary. It's just our normal approach to intelligence work." "That's exactly what makes it revolutionary," Thrace replied. "The Coalition has spent thousands of years developing intelligence-gathering methods based on technological superiority. Advanced sensors that can detect things from orbit, artificial intelligence systems that analyze data patterns, surveillance technology that can monitor communications across entire star systems. They forgot that sometimes the best intelligence comes from actually talking to people, from living among them, from caring enough to understand their perspective as individuals, not just as data points." He pulled out a data pad and showed her the screen. Earth's Intelligence Division has received 17 formal requests for collaboration from other coalition members. They want to learn human intelligence methods. Some species are even requesting joint training programs where their agents can learn alongside ours. Thrace looked at Hannah seriously. "You've done more than help end a war. You've shown the entire galaxy that humanity has something genuinely valuable to contribute to the galactic community, not despite being young and technologically primitive, but because of it. Our newness means we haven't forgotten lessons that older civilizations have lost over time. We're adaptable," Hannah said simply. "We've had to be throughout our entire history. When you grow up on a world with hundreds of different languages and thousands of different cultures, you learn to adjust quickly. When your planet has environmental conditions ranging from frozen Arctic wasteland to burning desert to dense jungle, you learn that survival often means cooperation and understanding, not just competition and conflict." A soft chime sounded. Thrace checked his datapad. "That's your signal. The delegates want to meet you personally." Both sides agreed that you should be present for the first joint diplomatic dinner. "Commander Tharick specifically requested your attendance. He said something about wanting to hear your honest assessment of his ship's maintenance procedures, now that you can speak freely." Hannah laughed. It was a sound of genuine happiness. "I suppose I owe him an honest critique after lying to him for 4 months." She straightened her uniform and prepared to leave. But she paused at the door. "Admiral, there's something I want to say. When I submitted those reports and they were all ignored, I was angry. I was frustrated. I felt like I had risked everything for nothing, like my work didn't matter to anyone. But you kept going," Thrace said quietly. "You kept filing reports even when no one acknowledged them, even when you had every reason to believe nobody would ever read them. Because that's what you do," Hannah said firmly. "You do the job properly even when it's hard, even when no one is watching or appreciating your work. Even when you're not sure it will ever matter, you do it because maybe someday it will matter. Maybe someone will read those reports eventually. Maybe the information will save lives down the road." She smiled slightly. "And if nothing else, you'll know you tried your absolute best. That you did everything you possibly could. That if things go wrong, it won't be because you gave up or stopped caring." Admiral Thrace nodded slowly. "That's a very human philosophy. I'll take that as a compliment, sir." As Hannah left the observation deck and headed toward the diplomatic dinner, Admiral Thrace stayed at the window. He watched the celebration happening below. Former enemies were eating together, laughing together, beginning the slow, difficult process of building real trust between their peoples. The Velcrin ambassador had been right during that meeting 3 months ago. What Lieutenant Commander Kim accomplished was changing how the Coalition viewed humanity. They had entered the galactic community with the weakest military, the oldest technology, and the least impressive scientific achievements. Every other species had assumed humans would always be junior partners, minor players in galactic affairs. But Hana had proven something important. She showed that wisdom doesn't only come from advanced technology or ancient civilizations. Sometimes the newest members of a community have the freshest perspectives. Sometimes the species that struggled the most has the most valuable lessons to teach. Humanity had brought something to the galactic coalition that had been missing: the ability to adapt quickly, the willingness to understand enemies instead of just fighting them, the hard-earned knowledge that peace built on mutual respect lasts longer than peace built on fear and domination. Admiral Thrace thought about what Hana had said. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is try to understand your enemy instead of just defeating them. That wasn't just a nice philosophy. It was humanity's first real contribution to galactic civilization, and it was a contribution that would change how species interacted with each other for generations to come. 3 months after, a human intelligence officer stood in a briefing room and calmly explained that the assembled experts were presenting her own research back to her. The war ended, not because one side had better weapons, not because one side was stronger or smarter, but because someone took the time to understand, because someone believed that even enemies could become friends if you tried hard enough.